I found out my wife was cheating. And instead of confronting her, I vanished. 6 years later, she found me, and what happened next, I never saw coming. It's been nearly 6 years, and I still remember the day I found out like it happened this morning. I was 33, married for 4 years at the time, living in Northern Virginia, and thinking life was fine. Not amazing, not bad, just normal. Comfortable. Safe. My wife, Tessa, and I didn't have kids, but we had a life. A house. A dog. A routine. Tessa worked in PR, full of energy, the type of person who made people feel like they were her best friend even after 5 minutes. I think that's part of what made it hurt so much. She was so good at being convincing. I was working remote at the time, still am, actually, freelance systems consultant. That day, I was home, on a long call with a client in Berlin, pacing the kitchen with my headset on. Tessa had left for a work lunch, which wasn't unusual, especially with her job. What was unusual was that she'd left her iPad behind. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. But while I was on that call, I saw a text come through the screen, lighting up with a name I didn't recognize, Jason. It read, "Lunch was amazing. Can't wait to see you again tonight, winking face." Now look, I'm not the jealous type. Or at least, I didn't used to be. But something about the emoji, the tone, it didn't sit right. I tried to ignore it. I really did. But 5 minutes later, another message popped up. "Don't forget to bring that black dress I like." Still on my call, still talking about system architecture, I was trying to keep my voice steady while staring at this stupid message on her iPad, feeling like my heart had just dropped into my gut. I don't remember how I ended that meeting. I just know that afterward, I grabbed the iPad and, without thinking twice, opened the messages. I shouldn't have been able to. Tessa was private about her stuff, but apparently, she hadn't set a passcode. Or maybe she did, but just forgot to log out. And there it was. Months of messages. I sat down at the kitchen table. I couldn't even stand. I felt like the room was tilting. The texts were full of plans, inside jokes, memories they had together. I saw photos, her in lingerie I'd never seen before. Her in a hotel room I didn't recognize. Him shirtless, kissing her neck in a selfie. I had to stop myself from vomiting right then and there. They had a routine. Thursdays. Always Thursdays. She told me she had a late meeting every Thursday for the past 3 months. And I had believed her. Every single time. My hands were shaking as I scrolled. I wasn't looking for more, but I couldn't stop. The worst part was, she didn't even seem to be wrestling with guilt. There wasn't a single message where she sounded conflicted or torn. She was happy. Like she'd found something better. The black dress. The lunch. The inside jokes. It was all just a completely different life she was living while pretending to be my wife. I didn't confront her that day. I should have, maybe, but I didn't. I closed the iPad, walked out of the house, drove to my buddy Carl's place across town, and stayed there for 2 nights. Tessa blew up my phone. Voicemails, texts, even emails. "Where are you? Is everything okay? I'm worried." Classic deflection. Like she hadn't just been screwing someone behind my back for months. Carl didn't ask questions. He took one look at me when I walked in and handed me a beer. That's all I needed. A few hours later, I told him everything. We sat on his back porch until 2 a.m., just drinking and saying nothing for long stretches. I went back on Sunday morning while she was at yoga, of course she was at yoga, and packed a single bag. I left my key on the table. No note, no explanation. Then I vanished. I cancelled my phone number. Deleted all social media. Got a new email. I stayed in Carl's spare room for a month while I found a new place. I hired a lawyer, filed for divorce, and instructed them to contact Tessa for all communications. I didn't want to hear her voice. I didn't want an apology. I didn't even want answers. I wanted out. Tessa did try. For a while, anyway. The lawyer said she cried when she got the papers. Claimed she didn't understand. Tried to call him and ask why I wouldn't talk to her. She even showed up at Carl's place once, but I wasn't home. He told her I didn't live there anymore. That was the last time anyone I knew saw her. The divorce finalized in under 3 months. We didn't have kids or joint accounts. I didn't want the house, didn't care about the furniture. I wanted it all gone. Everything she touched felt tainted. I moved across the state, then across the country. Landed in Seattle. Found a small but solid 1-bedroom near Green Lake. Took a contract job that turned permanent. made new friends, dated casually, joined a hiking group. For a while, it worked. I got better. I started laughing again. The only people who knew the full stories were Carl and one coworker I'd grown close with. Everyone else knew me as the chill tech guy who doesn't talk much about his past. And I liked it that way. That was until about 4 months ago when the past decided to knock. It started small. A message request on Instagram from a profile I didn't recognize. No photo, no name. Just, "I think I found you." I ignored it. Deleted the message. Blocked the account. A week later, another message. This one was more direct. "Please, just let me talk to you. I'm so sorry." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't even need to guess. I knew it was her. Tessa. I blocked that account too. But she wasn't done. It's funny, the things you think you've buried, until someone starts digging them up. I thought I'd moved on. But seeing her try to reach out? I could feel that same heat in my chest that I felt sitting at my kitchen table all those years ago, reading her texts to another man. The weird thing was, she wasn't angry. Not in the messages. Not "how could you leave me," or "why did you ghost me?" No, it was all regret. Please. Apologies. Begging. It made me sick. I started getting anxious again. Checking behind me when I walked home. Making sure no one was following me. I even changed my number again, just in case. But somehow, she kept finding new ways to poke through the cracks. An anonymous letter in my mailbox with just 2 words. "Please talk." I started to wonder, why now? After all this time, why reach out now? What did she want from me? Answers? Forgiveness? Another shot? I wasn't sure if I'd ever respond. But I knew one thing, she wasn't done yet. And neither was the story. I didn't sleep much after that letter showed up in my mailbox. It wasn't just the words, "Please talk." It was the way it looked. No return address. My name handwritten in shaky script on a plain white envelope. It was postmarked from Northern Virginia. That confirmed it. Tessa knew where I was. And that shook me more than I wanted to admit. I'd taken so many steps to disappear, a new city, new number, new accounts, everything. I'd even scrubbed my LinkedIn and kept my social media completely locked down. So how? How did she find me? I called Carl that night. First time we'd really talked in a while. "She found you?" he asked, clearly stunned. "Man, after all this time?" "Yeah." He was quiet for a second. "What do you think she wants?" I didn't answer right away. Because honestly, I wasn't sure. Maybe closure. Maybe forgiveness. Or maybe she just wanted to feel better about herself. Like if I forgave her, then she could check that box and move on. Maybe she couldn't handle the idea that she never got to explain herself. Or maybe, deep down, she still thought we could fix things. The audacity of that possibility made me grit my teeth. Carl let out a long breath. "Look, I'm just gonna say it. Don't respond. You don't owe her anything. You walked away. You rebuilt. That's not a bridge, it's rubble." "I know," I said. And I meant it. But there was something itching in the back of my brain that wouldn't leave me alone. Was she trying to feel better? Or was she spiraling? The next message came through Facebook Messenger 2 days later. It was a burner profile again, but the writing style was familiar now. "I know I hurt you. I live with that every day. I'm not asking for anything. I just want to talk. Please, just talk to me. One time." And attached was a picture. Not of her. Not of the past. But of a hospital wristband. With her name. And a date from 3 weeks prior. I stared at it for a long time, not knowing what the hell to feel. Was this manipulation? A trick? An honest appeal? Was she dying? I didn't respond. But I didn't delete it either. The days that followed were a blur. I'd stare at the message on my phone while sipping coffee in the morning, or when I was supposed to be focusing on work. I kept wondering if she was sick, or just using that image as a way to wedge open a door I'd closed for good reason. My rational mind kept screaming, "Don't open it. Don't go back. Don't invite the storm." But something cracked. I didn't respond directly. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in over 5 years. I Googled her. She hadn't changed her last name after the divorce, which surprised me. Maybe that was intentional. Maybe she never stopped hoping I'd come back. I found her LinkedIn. Her profile photo looked different. Older. Still beautiful, sure, but not in the effortless way I remembered. There were lines on her face now. Sadness in her eyes. Or maybe that was just me projecting. She still worked in PR, though at a smaller firm now. Then I found a local blog post she'd written a month ago. It was about second chances. It was vague, almost annoyingly so, but if you read between the lines, it was basically about regret. About owning your mistakes. About hurting someone you loved and not being able to take it back. I still didn't reply. But I started paying attention. Another week went by before anything else happened. I thought maybe she'd finally given up. But then I got a voicemail. I don't know how she got my number, maybe through a friend of a friend, or maybe she paid for one of those online people finding services, but it was her voice. After 6 years of silence, it felt unreal to hear it again. Hey, I'm sorry to do this. I know you don't want to hear from me, and I've tried so hard to respect that, but I didn't know what else to do. I got sick a few weeks ago. I'm okay now, but it scared me. And I realized if something happened, you'd never even know. And I couldn't live with that. I don't expect anything. I needed you to know that I've changed. I'm not the same person I was. And I miss you. Every day. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Click. I listened to it twice. I don't even know why I saved it. Maybe I wanted proof that I wasn't imagining all of this. The next few days were torture. Part of me felt like I'd made a mistake ghosting her so completely. Another part of me felt like I'd done the only thing that made sense at the time. I was trying to survive. And survival doesn't come with a manual. Finally, I broke my silence. I didn't call. I didn't message. But I sent one short email to the last address I remembered her using, not even knowing if she still checked it. Subject, you got what you wanted. Message, I got your messages. I heard the voicemail. I don't know what you want from me. But I'm not interested in digging up the past. I wish you peace. That's all. I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. She replied just hours later. Thank you for writing. I don't want to bring chaos into your life again. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But if you'd ever be willing to talk, to meet for just one conversation, I would be grateful. I just want to make things right before it's too late. That last part made my stomach turn. Before it's too late. What was I supposed to do with that? I didn't respond. But her words haunted me. At night, I'd lie awake, hearing her voice. Remembering her laugh. Her perfume. The way she used to make Saturday morning pancakes and dance in the kitchen with our dog between her feet. But those memories were poison now. Sweet, but deadly. Carl called me again that weekend. I told him everything. Dude, he said after a long silence. You can't go back. You know that, right? I'm not going back, I said quietly. But maybe I'll listen. One time. Just to close the book. Carl didn't like that idea. I didn't either, honestly. But something inside me couldn't ignore it anymore. Not yet. Because deep down, I needed to know why. I needed to look her in the eye, after all these years, and ask the question I'd buried so deep. Why wasn't I enough? I picked the cafe because it was neutral, bright, public, casual. The kind of place you could meet an old friend or a coworker, or your estranged ex-wife who cheated on you and shattered your entire worldview 6 years ago. I got there 10 minutes early. Sat near the window with a coffee I wasn't drinking, heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. I didn't know if she'd show. Part of me hoped she wouldn't. But then she walked in. It was like watching a ghost develop into color. Tessa. Her hair was shorter. Softer. She wore a long brown coat, scarf loose around her neck, sunglasses she pulled off once she spotted me. We locked eyes for a second, just a second, and I swear the air between us changed. I stood without thinking, and she walked over. Hi, she said softly. Hey. We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. We just Saturday. The silence was heavy. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said, voice trembling just slightly. I wasn't either. She looked down, fiddled with the corner of a napkin. Her eyes were red, tired. There were faint shadows beneath them. Whether from crying or illness, I couldn't tell. I didn't mean to bring all this back, she said. But when I got sick, something just clicked. It made me realize how unfinished this felt. I didn't say anything. She glanced up. You don't have to talk. I know I don't deserve to ask you anything. I needed to see you. Needed you to know that I'm not the same person I was. I leaned back in my chair, arms folded. So who are you now? That made her pause. I could see her blinking fast, trying to hold it together. I don't know, she said eventually. But I'm not her anymore. You were really good at being her, I replied. You made me believe you loved me. Every day. And all that time, you were building a second life behind my back. She nodded. No excuses, no interruptions. I know what I did. I think about it constantly. I've tried to dissect it, to figure out what was wrong with me then. It wasn't about you, God, it wasn't. You were the only real thing in my life. That's why I couldn't face you after it all came out. I scoffed quietly. You didn't face me at all. You let me vanish. Because I knew I deserved it, she said, a little louder than she meant to. A few people glanced our way. She took a breath, lowered her voice. I thought if I tried to explain, I'd just hurt you more. I thought silence was merciful. I laughed once, short and bitter. You think ghosting someone is merciful? No, she said quietly. I don't think anything about what I did was merciful. I think it was cowardly. I was too ashamed. Another silence. I looked out the window. The world kept moving. Cars passing. People on their phones. Someone walking their dog. All so normal. I don't want to rehash the past, she continued. I know you've moved on. I'm glad you have. I just needed to say sorry. And not the kind of sorry you send in a message or a voicemail. The kind you say when you can finally look someone in the eye. I looked at her then. Really looked. She looked small. Not in size, but in presence. She used to radiate confidence, power. Now she looked like she was barely holding herself together. I spent years being angry, I said. I rebuilt everything because I had to. Not because I wanted to. You broke something in me I didn't even know could break. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she didn't let them fall. I'm not here to ask for anything, she said. Not a second chance. Not even forgiveness. I know I lost the right to any of that. But I wanted you to know you were the best thing in my life. And I threw it away because I was selfish and insecure and stupid. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure I could. Why? I finally asked, the word scraping my throat like gravel. Why him? Why cheat? She flinched. Then sat very still. I wish I had a simple answer, she said. But I don't. He was validation. Excitement. I was scared of how settled we were becoming. I told myself I wanted to feel alive again. But all I did was prove how broken I was. I swallowed hard. You could have just left me. I know. You could have talked to me. I know, she said, pain spilling into her voice. I told myself lies to justify it. That you'd be better off without me. That you didn't need me. That you were too focused on work. But the truth is, you were just consistent. Kind. Reliable. And I was addicted to chaos. I didn't realize I was gripping the edge of the table until my fingers started to cramp. You destroyed us, I said. And then you let me disappear like none of it ever happened. She was crying now, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. I punished myself for a long time, she said. Therapy. A lot of it. I've had relationships since you. But none of them lasted. I always compared them to what I had with you. And I never told them why my marriage ended. I raised an eyebrow. Because I was too ashamed, she said, shrugging. And because? I always hoped, somewhere deep down, that I'd get to tell you in person. Even if it was just once. I sat back, tired. It was a lot. Too much. I hadn't expected to feel this much hearing her say all the things I'd imagined her saying in my head for years. I don't know what you want from me, I said after a long silence. Closure? Forgiveness? No, she whispered. Just this. Just the chance to say it. I looked down at my hands. Then back at her. Well, I said. You said it. She nodded slowly, sniffling. Yeah. I guess I did. We sat in silence for a while after that. Just breathing the same air. Strangers and ghosts. Eventually, she stood. I'll go, she said. Thank you. For hearing me. I nodded. Couldn't say much more. My throat felt tight. She turned, walked away slowly. And for a second, I saw the girl I fell in love with. But she wasn't that girl anymore. And neither was I the man who'd loved her. As she disappeared out the door, something in me felt lighter. Not healed. Not whole. But less heavy. Maybe some doors are meant to stay closed. But sometimes, opening them, just for a moment, lets out the last of the stale air inside. After Tessa walked out of the cafe, I just sat there. The world moved around me, like I wasn't even there. People ordering lattes. Baristas shouting names. A kid crying somewhere near the back. But I was frozen in that seat, stuck between the weight of a past I thought I'd buried and the unsettling quiet of whatever had just cracked open inside me. I didn't feel better. Not really. But I didn't feel worse, either. Maybe the word was unsettled. That night, Carl called. I guess he knew I wouldn't be able to sit with it alone for long. Well, he asked. I met her, I said, staring at the ceiling of my apartment. We talked. She cried. I listened. And I don't know what to do with any of it. Carl was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, do you feel anything for her still? I hated that question. Because the honest answer wasn't no. But it wasn't yes, either. She's not the same, I said. And I'm not either. It felt like talking to a stranger who used to live in my body. He let out a long exhale. You know, you don't owe her anything. Closure, conversation, none of it. But if it helped you let go of something, even a little, maybe it wasn't a total waste. I don't know if it helped, I muttered. Well, what do you want now? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. And that scared me more than anything. The next day, I went back to work like nothing had happened. Pretended like I wasn't emotionally jet-lagged from revisiting a chapter I'd locked tight for half a decade. My co-workers probably just thought I hadn't slept well. They weren't wrong. But Tessa stayed in my mind. Not in a longing way. Not in the what-if way either. More like a riddle I couldn't solve. And then the second message came. 2 days after our conversation, she emailed again. Subject, no response needed. Body, I just wanted to say thank you for meeting me. I know that conversation probably cost you something. I don't expect to hear from you again. I won't bother you anymore. I just needed you to know how sorry I truly am. And that I'm glad you found your way forward, even if I couldn't be a part of it. And she meant it. I could tell. That was it. No strings. No follow-up. No manipulations or pleas. Just, goodbye. So why did it still gnaw at me? I called my sister, Emily. She's 4 years older, blunt, and emotionally fluent in a way I'll never be. She was one of the few family members who knew the real story. I hadn't talked to her in a couple of months, life gets busy, but I needed to hear her voice. So let me get this straight, she said after I told her everything. She cheats, you go full witness protection, and now she's popping back in like a ghost with a guilt complex. Basically. She sighed. Okay, look. I'm gonna say something you probably don't want to hear, but hear me out. Go on. You're still angry, yeah? But part of you's also curious. You want to understand why she did what she did, not just the surface-level excuse. You want to believe there's a version of this story where it wasn't all meaningless. I guess. But you're not gonna get that. Even if she gives you every detail, every apology, nothing she says will make it okay. The pain doesn't go away just because you understand it. I rubbed my eyes. So what do I do with it? You forgive her, she said simply. Not for her. For you. You let it go so it stops taking up real estate in your brain. It doesn't mean what she did was okay. It just means it doesn't get to own you anymore. That stuck with me. Forgive, not to heal her. But to free myself. It sounded so clean in theory. But in practice? Every time I replayed the betrayal in my mind, I felt the same familiar sting. That night I found the messages. That first drive to Carl's place. The feeling of becoming invisible to the person who once swore I was their everything. And then, there was another layer I hadn't wanted to look at. The part of me that had liked seeing her sad. That had wanted her to suffer, just a little. I hated that part of myself, but I couldn't lie, it was there. I wanted her to feel what I felt. But now that I'd seen it, it didn't feel like justice. It felt like ashes. A week passed. Then 2. Tessa didn't message again. She'd kept her word. She vanished, this time on my terms. And just like that, the storm was over. But something had changed in me. I found myself walking to the lake one evening, just to sit. Not scrolling. Not answering emails. Just watching the water, still and reflective, like it was trying to mirror the parts of me I hadn't faced in years. That's when I realized something. I hadn't been ghosting just Tessa. I'd ghosted myself. The version of me that loved fully, trusted completely, believed in people without needing insurance policies. After her betrayal, I locked that part of me in a box. And now, maybe, it was time to let him out again. Forgiveness isn't a gift for the other person. It's a key. And maybe I'd finally found mine. That night, I wrote one last email. I didn't send it right away. I let it sit in my drafts for a full day. Then, finally, I hit send. Subject, one last thing. Body, I don't hate you. I did, for a while. But I don't anymore. I believe you're sorry. And I forgive you. Not to fix anything, but so we can both move on. You were a part of my life. A painful part, yes, but not the only part. I hope you find peace. Please don't reach out again. Take care of yourself. I signed it with my first name only. And with that, I closed the book. Not slammed it shut. Not burned it. Just closed it. It was time. It's been almost a year now since I sent that final email. I've reread it maybe twice since, both times with a strange sense of detachment. I don't regret sending it, not even a little. If anything, it marked a clean punctuation at the end of a sentence I'd left hanging too long. Tessa never responded, and true to her word, she never tried again. No new burner accounts, no unexpected letters, no more shadows lurking around the corners of my inbox. She disappeared, quietly, like she should have the first time. The peace that followed wasn't loud or dramatic. It came slowly, like a thaw. At first, I didn't even notice it happening. My mornings stopped feeling like rehearsals for disasters. I wasn't checking over my shoulder or bracing for another "hey, it's me" message. I could walk into my own silence without fear. I started seeing someone around 6 months ago. Her name's Lila. She's got this calm energy about her, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but holds it anyway. We met at a local bookstore, cliché, I know, but I was there looking for a gift for my niece and ended up in a conversation about sci-fi novels neither of us were buying. She asked me, on our third date, what happened in my last relationship. I paused, took a deep breath, and told her the truth, summarized, but honest. I told her I'd been married once, that it ended because of infidelity, and that it had taken a long time to clean up the pieces of myself after it fell apart. She didn't flinch. Didn't give me pity eyes or a fake "that's awful" response. She just nodded and said, "Thank you for telling me. That must have been really hard." That was it. Simple. Respectful. Real. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. I wasn't looking for someone to erase what happened with Tessa. I wasn't looking for a redemption story or a happily ever after to prove the ex was wrong. I was just looking to be known. Fully. Truthfully. For a long time, I thought ghosting Tessa had been my greatest act of control. My power move. My clean exit. But now, I think the real strength came in allowing myself to sit across from her again, vulnerable, pissed off, but still standing. That was the closure. Everything since then has been a quiet kind of rebuilding. I joined a local cycling group. Reconnected with my dad after years of sporadic contact. I even started writing again, just short stuff, personal essays mostly, nothing serious. But it feels good to have words again, especially ones that belong to me. Last month, I got an email from my old lawyer out of the blue. He was cleaning up old files and wanted to know if I wanted a copy of the divorce paperwork before they shredded the archives. I told him no. Let it be dust. I don't need proof of that chapter anymore. It's not who I am now. Sometimes I still think about that version of me, the one who drove away from that house without saying a word, just a bag of clothes and a storm in his chest. I think about how lost he was, how afraid, how angry. I want to tell him something. Not that everything gets better overnight. Not that he'll wake up one day and magically feel healed. But that one day, he'll sit in a coffee shop across from the woman who broke his heart, and he won't feel small. He won't feel powerless. He'll feel finished. And that's enough. The last time I drove past that cafe, I didn't even think of her. I thought about the book I was reading, about calling Lila after work, about whether I had milk in the fridge. That's how you know the ghosts are finally gone. Not because you banish them, but because one day you stop inviting them in.